No, you're gonna hand signal it. No, okay. Everyone, fuck. Everyone, relax. This is TOFOP. I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Will Anderson. Hello, and thank you for watching.
What's going on? Are you cleaning your screen, or are you just being? Oh, okay. No,
I was just being annoying. Sorry,
you're being annoying. That's okay.
Screen. There you go.
Welcome
Hello.
back.
Welcome back
to the show. For you, it's been a week. For Will and I, it's been 7 minutes. We've both gone off and made a coffee. I'm eating some banana bread I made last night.
How is it?
I like it. I've I'm into my baking, and I've been trying to find healthy alternatives to bake. And I think that banana bread's the only one I think that you can sort of put more healthy stuff in and it still tastes okay. When you try and make cookies too healthy or even muffins or whatever, it always never quite works out. Banana bread though, because there's nothing really bad in this besides a bit of maple syrup, a bit of gluten-free flour, and then the rest is just like bananas and chocolate. I put chocolate in as well.
But you don't have to. That's
no.
Like chocolate is definitely one of those things that you don't have to put in there.
But dark chocolate's fine, apparently. That's what everyone tells me.
I mean, everything's
And you know,
fine.
like real chocolate snobs say that that's the real chocolate. Like, you know, the milk chocolate that we all like.
Yeah.
Have we talked about this? I feel like
and white chocolate isn't even really chocolate. They shouldn't even call it chocolate. Who fucking cares? Like, enough with your labels. Like, it's fine. People can enjoy whatever type of chocolate they like. White chocolate, dark chocolate, brown chocolate. You know what the thing is, Charlie? You probably don't get this because you're not as woke as me, but when it comes to chocolate, I don't see colour. White chocolate, dark chocolate.
You just
milk
open your mouth and say, put it in. Whatever it is, put it in.
You know what it's about to me? What's on the inside. And by that I mean the caramel filling or the strawberry filling.
I don't think they are. Like, I think that there is a definite... like if you're talking about that, let's say, well, we're going to say there's 3 shades of chocolate, 50 shades of grey, 3 shades of chocolate. There's white, there's milk, there's dark.
But there's a lot of shades in between. Like there's shades.
I understand, but generally speaking, the 3 broad categories, are we going to say are white, milk, and dark?
How do we feel about caramel? Like the sort of like, because that's kind of its own, like golden
it's an abomination,
chocolate.
Will. It goes against
That's where
God's
you draw
law.
the line.
No crossbreeds.
Like we're going to breed caramel
Mud
out
blood.
entirely. Charlie's got a white chocolate policy.
That's right. I've never tried a caramel. I like caramel, but not necessarily with chocolate.
Do you like milk chocolate? Do you like white chocolate?
Not really, no. It's too sweet for me.
Okay.
I find that too rich.
Maybe caramel wouldn't be for you either then.
I like white chocolate as when it's put in tandem with, like, say, cranberries or, like white chocolate ice cream.
The cranberries, right?
Yeah, that's right. Do, 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 do. I'm eating chocolate, got diabetes. Do, 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 do. Do you have to let it linger? Do you have to? Now I've got I've got a cavity. So anyway,
it wasn't. I mean, Weird Al.
The master of improv once again. I know you. A couple of weeks ago, you and Gareth Reynolds were on stage, just fucking nailing it. When's our improv show going to start?
Yeah.
It'll be you and me on stage together, you riffing, and then me going, "Wait a minute, no. What if I hang on?" And then you say that bit again, and then I'll come back with something really good.
You're
how I
at the
improv.
back for 45 minutes with a pad. I got it.
No, I've never had caramel chocolate, and I'm not really, like the Cadbury Creations range, right? That's where they'll whack in jelly beans, pop rocks,
sure,
all kinds of shit. I think that's just too much for me. I'm a real traditionalist.
Here's what I would tell you as a person who eats a lot of chocolate. I reckon it's like chocolate, that sort of chocolate, it's like, I think that the dark chocolate is the only good chocolate people. They're more like I watch pornography, but it's only in black and white, and I'm there for the storyline people. And then there's the people who eat chocolate all the time, where you've got to find a new thing to give you a thrill.
Yeah.
Like you're finding some, like, what else can they jam in chocolate to,
Do you ever get fed those bizarre? Like it always tends to be American. It'll be an Instagram video of someone making a dessert, and it'll be like. They'll take
they'll layer Kit Kats and then layer Mars bars.
And then they'll crush up Doritos, and then they'll put cheese on it, and then they'll pour chocolate sauce on top of that. And I'm like, who the fuck is eating? It's like, I've got a sweet tooth, and I've known to indulge in a fucking Tim Tam Sundae in gold class from time to time. But even that, I'm like, this is bad. Like, there is a problem in the world where we have some people starving and we have other people making this shit. Like, it seems like someone's in calorie deficit and the other person has got too many calories. We need to balance it out a bit.
Yeah, I do like that stunt food. This is one of the worst things that America has brought to the world. And there is a list of bad things America has brought to the world. But I reckon this is one of the worst, which is the stunt eating. Like, that is the size of what you're eating, or that there is something, it's been happening in that country for a very long time. That idea of you, like, eat this food and it's for free, or like if you eat it in 30 minutes, it's for free.
It's a
our
14
national
kilo
day of
hamburger.
celebration. We're going to celebrate our national day by having a hot dog eating competition, right?
Yeah. I saw a guy, an Australian guy, eating a 3 kilo sundae from Baskin Robbins, like for his Instagram feed or whatever, and it was just fucking disgusting. Like, it's horrible, and I don't understand. Like, I'm not saying we need to be going out and like educating everyone on nutrition and stuff, but surely we shouldn't be encouraging that. Like the opposite end, which is eat 3 kilos of ice cream and sugar. It's fucking terrible. And especially considering like the where we're at with wastage and food scarcity and stuff.
Yes.
The perversity of it is terrible.
I mean,
it's
it
just
feels
terrible.
like the footage they show at the start of the documentary about how everything went wrong, right?
Yeah.
Is this like...
That's what they needed at the start of Furiosa. Like, they have the montage of like, we're running out of oil and stuff, and then they just need a guy eating a 3 kilo ice cream.
Oh, we're living the montage. That's the point of those movies, right? They don't need to show the montage because we're currently living the longest prequel to Fury Road in history, right? Like, we're living through those times. It's so, like, yes, those kind of big eating, stunt eating. Here's this restaurant where they serve the portions on a shovel. And you're like, they should shut that place down. That is not the right size portion of food for people to get.
But it's weird too, isn't it, that like I understand, we've talked before, and many people have made note of when you go to America, the portions you get served, like you'll get your main, and then they'll bring up a separate side that's filled with like fries or veggies or salad or whatever it is, and then there'll be another side of something else. Maybe there'll be some pickles and some garnishes on top of that. But this idea that society's doing well because you can eat this amount of food which you won't get through for cheap. Is that a good indication that society is doing well, that we're wasting that much food, or encouraging like binge eating of terrible food?
I mean, it doesn't feel... Are we about to pivot to one of those sort of podcasts? Because it feels like we both arrived at the same place at the same time, which is we've got to shut this shit down. You've got to eat only liver all day long. That's the secret. Charlie and we'll tell you.
I just think it's... I don't... Maybe it's because I grew up not being a foodie, and I even today I don't have the most kind of sophisticated
you have
taste.
simple food tastes.
Simple food taste, and I'm not like a connoisseur by any stretch of the imagination, but at the same time it's not about the quality of the food, it's the fucking quantity that scares me, like the amount of wastage and the stuff.
That's
that
right.
people don't eat.
In a world where people are starving, that the method that we currently have involves so much food wastage and the encouragement of food wastage. So it's not even the fact that the problem exists, because plenty of problems exist in the world, right? And some of them we're trying to do things about. Probably not as many of them as we should be, but some of them we are trying to do something about. And I know that there are people trying to tackle food wastage like on the ground, like there are organisations that tackle it, but there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of shame around it, right? Like the idea of, in the way that like in times of drought, there is shame around the person who's watering the concrete at the front of their house, right? You're doing something, you're taking a resource that is precious to everybody else and you are wasting it. like other people would kill to have what you have, and you are taking it for granted. Like we have that attitude at the moment to food, and it is publicly displayed, and there seems to be no backlash or shame about the fact that people like revel in food wastage.
Well, it's kind of, I always think of idiocracy, you know, and, you know, we talked last week about Furiosa, which we'll get back into at some point. But if you want an eerie vision of the future, I don't think anything's nailed it quite as well as idiocracy. But their sort of vision of this sort of bulk purchase Costco model of store just expanding until like that's all it is like when you want to get anything, you just go into a fucking giant warehouse with a forklift and get huge bags of whatever product is in bulk. Because I understand, you know, I was literally just at a massive IGA, you know, in Ballina the other day, which was super low prices, but super in bulk. And you're sort of going, oh, this is, you know, really great. Like, you know, especially at the moment with cost of living, it's like I can get like produce really cheap, and you can buy like, you know, a box of cornflakes the size of a coffin, which is appropriate, all this kind of stuff. But at some point you're like, well, how is this so cheap? And what are the people who are stuck in the shelves getting paid? And like there is this idea that we're sort of concentrating, like giving people less options to go more like, not even farm to table, but even just buy locally. And we're just funneling everyone into these giant warehouses. So what is it, 3 or 4 companies? Like, I don't know if the rest of the world is the same, but Australia, in terms of the stranglehold that Coles and Woolworths, like we're seeing this play out right now. Like they don't give a fuck. Like since COVID, they're like, oh, this is amazing. We can do anything. And people pay whatever. And then interest rates go up and it's like, these fucking idiots are still paying for it. Let's just fucking like charge whatever we want. Let's just bump up prices based on what events are happening in the next couple of weeks that we can charge more for. You know, it's just... It's criminal. It's what it is. We need to take them down, Will.
I mean, it's almost as if a duopoly is equally as bad as a monopoly. Because if you have two, like, and Australia is a country of duopolies that essentially act as monopolies, right?
Telecommunications,
but it's very,
supermarkets.
essentially the two competing businesses will go out at the start of the game, shake hands with each other, pretend to do competition, but essentially are supporting the same game, right? Like, and that is.
And you could argue that the two major parties are doing the same thing as well.
Oh yeah. You bloody argue that like that's just like our bloody politics, isn't it? Just two bloody the same, shaking hands at the start of the day, doing the bloody same stuff, right? Am I right?
You're right.
Wake
You're
up,
right.
sheeple. But in a time like this, when you realise that things like food and shelter, we've reprioritised them as not being things that people can just expect. And I'm not sure, like there was a point, and look, there's always been obviously disadvantaged people, and worldwide, we're very lucky in Australia that our level of disadvantage, you know, is disproportionately like good compared to, you know, a lot of other countries. But those who are disadvantaged are still incredibly disadvantaged.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't make them feel better to know that, like, on the scale of kind of impoverished countries, we're doing pretty well. And in fact, it'd probably make you feel worse than a country where most people have a roof over their heads. You don't.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it doesn't make it any better for the person who doesn't have access. But those things we considered to be, there were generations of Australians where just the idea that you would have, like, somewhere to live and be able to, like, have a job that gave you enough money that you could like eat and send your kids to school and whatever. That happened. Not for everybody, but there was a period of time where that was basically how we thought life was. And we moved on from that so quickly to a point where being able to afford food and being able to afford shelter is something that is disproportionately big in so much of the population's lives at the moment. Like even like middle class people who are living nice lifestyles are going, oh gee, it's so expensive to do everything right now. Like, you know, like to pay rent, to service a mortgage, to buy food for their family. And we moved on from that so quickly. That period we had, we're like, this is dumb. This is dumb. How everyone can like get a job and send their kids to school and afford a house. This is dumb. Let's get to the future where you can't get food or shelter for an affordable price.
Yeah, you know what I think we should do is privatise everything. Privatise everything. Make it only available to rich people who can buy shares in that company and then dictate the prices of things. And then, you know, it would be really smart. let's make property an investment. Rather than being some kind of essential service, we'll make it like an investment that you can write off on tax.
Let's have an incentive where sometimes it's in the interests of the big building company to buy somewhere, not build anything, and just land bank it to the value. How about that? Should we have that system?
What do you think of Purple Pingers online and the way he's been listing all these kind of land bank houses?
I mean, I love that there is... I always love when there's someone who is trying to do things for the right reasons. And I think when someone is a protest like Purple Pingers, and if people don't know who Purple Pingers is, then he's a TikTok... Well, it's kind of like started on TikTok, and the whole point was that, Australia, like many countries in the world, but has a housing affordability crisis, and there are a lot of empty homes all around the country that and there are a lot of people who don't have anywhere to live, and that seems like a problem, and nobody seems to be doing anything meaningful to address that problem. So he is doing probably the most confronting and anarchic thing that you can possibly do, and even one of those things that when you first hear about it, that you just have a natural body response to, oh, this is like
sounds
full
dangerous.
on. Like it sounds dangerous from all angles.
Yeah.
But he is finding out where these places are, and then he is publicising that as an opportunity for people to go and like live in those places. And I think
he's being very... You can tell that he studied law at some point, because he's been very careful to not say you should go live there. He's just saying, by the by, there is this property that has been untenanted for a number of years. It's overgrown. There's no one living there. I mean, it may provide housing to some. I'm not saying that they should go in there, but it could provide housing for someone.
And like, it's partly meant to be a point of protest, right? Around this idea, to bring it into the public consciousness. And I think it's been a resounding success at that. Is what I would say. I think like it's been one of the biggest cut-through things that anyone has done in this space for so long, and I think that is incredible. He says also, on a practical level, he believes that these people should be like able to live in houses, right? Like, which is the whole point of this. So there is some practicality to it, but I don't know. Like, it's hard to know, and I don't want to know, and I don't want to point out if people are then going and living in these houses or not living in these houses, or how many it's happened to, or what the legal implications of any of those things might be. But I think on face value alone, as a protest and pointing people in this direction and making sure people are having this conversation all the fucking time, the most confronting of ways, I could not dig this more. Like, I think this is exactly someone using their brains and their voice and putting their personal life on hold, to advocate on behalf of other people in a way that brings so much shit onto them. Like, like there has been such a huge backlash, like internationally, to this idea,
It is funny, because when it did cross into the States, like, I mean, this is the difference between the two countries. The response by landlords in Australia was very much like, "How dare you? This is irresponsible. You have no idea what it takes to be a landlord, and these properties could be untenanted for a number of reasons." It crosses into the States, and it's like, "You come on my property, I'll fucking shoot you!" Like within 2 seconds, it escalated into homicide. Yeah,
it was incredible, and it's one of those things that I think we should always be. There's a real mythology in Australia around home ownership. The great Australian dream to own your own home, and to, like, that's why it's been able to get so out of control as an investment property, because so many people got locked into it. And of course, if you have an asset of value, you don't want, as soon as you become part of the system, it's in your interest to have the system propped up around you, right? And so you become quite powerful. If the people who have the most value in a society are the ones who own homes, and then home ownership keeps going up and it excludes other people, it's very hard to get the people who are not being excluded, the ones who benefit from it, to buy into the idea that they've got to do something about this. And I just think if the mainstream media, they don't like to shove it in your face, and Purple Pingers is shoving it in everybody's face, and I think it's important that it is shoved in everybody's face, and that everyone is made to feel a little uncomfortable about what is going on.
I mean, it's quite courageous. I mean, it's
I
not
think
like
so.
the building industry is rife with organised crime and people who are willing to do
The building
things to
industry, the
silence
finance
dissenting
industry.
voices.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then I'm sure he's had so many threats, and probably some of them genuinely real threats. Like, you're talking about big industries, like, property development, building industry, like real estate industry. Like, there are so many government, mate. The government can give you all sorts of fucking trouble. Like, maybe not like the sort of, building industry, cement shoes style
Knock on the door.
trouble, but,
Yeah.
but like trouble, all sorts of trouble. I mean,
Yeah.
I loved when it crossed over to America and they had to discover what pingers meant. That was actually... Because it is great that our leading advocate on behalf of the unhoused or dispossessed people of Australia is a guy called Purple Pingers.
Yeah. I do love too how, based off the back of COVID and the lockdowns and stuff, there is this perception by a certain part of the states that Australia is just like authoritarian regime, like we're a communist party. In fact, I was listening to the Weekly Planet this week, and James had this running joke where he said we're all being told to do communism all the time. That's what we're doing in Australia, just communism, more social programs, communism, and it's true. Like, it's so hilarious that outside of that bubble, anything that is vaguely like a social service or based around this idea of like, community puts into a government program in order to benefit more people, that is somehow like I guess the argument is it's a government's inefficient, so you're just giving money away, but B, there's some kind of coercive control happening once you like contribute to that system. And it's been a brilliant, one of the great things that the capitalists have done, especially in the States, is convince people that socialism and communism are the same thing, or that socialism is a pejorative. Even though there are social programs that exist currently, or that there are systems in place for, the fire service, police, or roadworks, things like that, which that's a form of socialism that we can accept. But to talk about expanding it or rolling it out to be more effective is somehow, leaning towards some kind of dystopian society.
Just show me what the benefits from giving like all these private companies all the power has been. Like, is it really a better place than it was when that power was more dissipated, or that governments did have that power? Oh shit, Charlie, maybe we are about to roll out some communist propaganda on the podcast.
Well, I mean, the way things are at the moment, and, you said everyone is struggling. Like, that is every time I catch up with any friends, no matter where they sit on the socio-economic scale, everyone is struggling. Like, everyone is feeling the pinch relative to whatever their own
sometimes
situation
you can feel
is.
it from different directions as well. Like the comedy industry, for example, the live touring industry. There's a lot of things going on for a start, but also cost of living means that maybe you are someone who normally saw 3 shows at the Melbourne Comedy Festival, you maybe saw 1 instead. You're a person who sees 10, you only saw 7. Like, people are making those decisions on a daily basis. Or I went to see Taylor Swift, so I'm not going to see comedy this year, or whatever the question might be. People don't have, I think, at every level of, and the more every day you read an article about like, people are cutting down their daily coffee. Okay, that's fine. They can budget and like not go and get their daily coffee. But then that coffee shop's not like laying off staff because nobody's coming in for the coffee in the morning. So the pass-through effect to every layer of the society when things are like they are at the moment is, I don't think there are people. I mean, look, of course there are people who are immune to this. The fucking 1% who have all the money.
The people in the Citadel, in Gastown.
Dementors. He's got some good ideas though about how they're...
But then, I mean, that is the when it comes to the sort of social commentary of those films, like it is, you're right. It's like it falls back on resources. Who controls the resources? Yes. But there's also this, what you need in order to keep people compliant is a level of fear or promise of something, a level of fear of people trying to take something from you, or the promise of something incredible if you just stay the course, So that's kind of like, I guess Dementis' kind of crew are more would you say they're more like the anarchists, or at least they're marauders? They're sort of, they don't have as much of a structured system as the War Boys, who are very rigidly, it's a more of a military hierarchy.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, like Dementis is the challenger brand. He's
Yeah.
not like they're a bit more like I think Apple, in regard to like like it was a bit more sort of IBM. Everything was like going straight ahead Microsoft world, and then it's like we need to shake things up a little. He's a disruptor. He's the original disruptor.
Well, it's also that question of ego too, as well, right? Like, the reason he rides in that chariot with the 3 motorbikes and stuff is because it's not practical, but it's all about appearance. And so that's what I actually also loved about the way the character is introduced. It's very biblical when you sort of first meet him. He's got the white parachute over his head, very Jesus-esque, and he's speaking in these calm, hushed tones and very benevolent to this child that's been found in the wasteland. And then he just gets increasingly crass and base as the series unfolds.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, he has, aspirations to be this voice of the people or whatever. And maybe his intentions were good at one point. Like, maybe that's the next prequel series we'll get, is Dementus before he became Dementus. Like, he talks about how he lost his sweet ones, his children. He carries around that little stuffed teddy, which I thought was a really poignant kind of affectation. But at what point, what was he like? I was listening to the Weekly Planet, like I said, and I know Meso was like, he likes to think that Dementus was just an office worker. Like, if a Morton Joe was ex-military, then maybe Dementus was just like a regular guy who's like, because he doesn't seem to have any other organisational skills apart from he's a good talker.
Yeah, well, I reckon he was like a Instagram influencer or like a a gym bro.
Yeah, because
like,
he's so
he
fit.
Talks a good game. He's super fit. You know what I mean? Like, thinks he can run things, but he's actually not that good at the practicalities of how things actually work.
That first negotiation he has with a Morton Joe, where like he comes in and Morton Joe immediately just like fucking like outmaneuvers him. That's not your kid, and I'm going to take your doctor. And it's like, all right. He gives his list of demands, and Morton Joe goes, "You can have a quarter of this, half of that. I'm definitely not giving you that, and you're going to give me your 2 best crew." It's like, done, sold. Like, that's his negotiating genius. And I did like too that there's a little hint as well when he's sort of negotiating for what resources they want, and he talks about like they need meat or whatever, and he's like, my boys need protein. And it's like, that explains the muscles.
Right.
Like, where else is that physique coming from?
And in the wasteland, those sort of muscles are for show. You know what I mean? They're not for practicality. You don't actually need the style of muscles that like he has in that. That's vanity, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like the only other person like that was in Road Warrior, right? The Humongous, Lord Humongous, who looked like a bodybuilder as well. But you never actually see Humongous using them because everyone's just got guns and shit. No one's going to go like hand-to-hand combat.
Right. Yeah. It's just a body shape that only exists in that wasteland for the purposes of he looks like a gladiator on a chariot. That's what it feels like, with his long flowing hair and his like beautiful body. Like, it's there for the show of I present as what a leader looks like.
Do you ever find it distracting in movies now, like when men take their shirts off and no matter what character they're playing, they're always super ripped? Like, I watched the Roadhouse reboot and it's fun, it's enjoyable, but Jake Gyllenhaal got into this insane shape. Hasn't eaten a carb, just so shredded, probably didn't drink any water for the duration of the shoot, so his skin's super tight over you can see every single fucking muscle and vein. But I just watch it and it looks like, because I know what it takes to get to that level of kind of, shreddedness. And it's all consuming and there's nothing else. Like, you're hungry all the time. You're probably thirsty all the time. You're fucking this robot working out. So I can't watch him being this kind of, he's meant to be have you seen it?
I haven't seen it and I will never see it. And so I'm happy for you to spoil any of it.
So the way they reboot it is he's an ex-MMA fighter who's down on his luck and he gets asked to come down to Florida to kind of sort out this dive bar. But for a guy who's sleeping in his car, how the fuck is he so buff and shredded? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it is an accurate portrayal of the unhoused. Is that they still, whatever money he has enough money for protein powder and a gym membership.
Here's what I'm also going to say is I think it's a great thing for equality that Hollywood found a way to give men body dysmorphia as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean, this idea of to be a Hollywood actor, now you also have to be able to, like, turn your body into. I mean, Kamal Nanjiani is the most famous example of this, right? Like the fact that like just one of the funniest dudes on the planet, like. Was like, oh, I also have to dedicate. I mean, and he likes it, and he feels good about his like. So I'm not, but there just feels like, as you said, it's almost compulsory now. I'm like, I don't, and it doesn't add a lot to anything for me.
And I actually
other
thought
than
Hemsworth,
it reminds me of their vanity. Like Hemsworth looks like Hemsworth. So
and I feel like on the scale of Hemsworth Riggs, like this was the most kind of. Like, he's looked more insanely ripped when he's playing Thor or
I agree.
whatever
and
else.
Also, that's what he looks like. So that didn't feel like... He's looked like that since Thor.
Home and Away.
Yeah, well, that's right. He had that body shape on Home and Away, and he's only just kind of grown into it rather like he's gone on. He hasn't been like Jake Gyllenhaal. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Of all
Donnie
the people...
Darko's got a
Donnie
six-pack?
Darko's ripped now? Donnie Darko only eats protein? What's going on?
Yeah, I found it distracting because he's shirtless quite a bit in this, and maybe it's for the ladies or the guys. I don't know. But I did not. I don't find it appealing. I just find it distracting and painful because it's like that does not. I mean, I know when Jem has or her friends they're watching like the Met Gala or whatever, and they'll talk about that actress has gotten really thin to fit into that dress or whatever, and. I'm always like, oh yeah, I can't really see it, but maybe that's just because it's I'm not used to seeing the signs. But then when I see a Jake Gyllenhaal with that dehydrated,
you know what to look for.
I know what to lock for, and so maybe people look at him, oh, he looks great. And I'm like, he is. I mean, I've told this story before, but the year before I did the men's health thing, I know a friend of mine also did the same challenge, men's health challenge, and he ended up being hospitalized for dehydration because he got his fucking he got it all the balance all wrong, and he was like cutting carbs, but no, and so the irony being that competing for the cover of Men's Health, he put himself into hospital to have that that look, that kind of taut skin, every muscle showing. Like it's a weird thing too.
We never said it was men's good health, mate. You read that into it. We said it's about all men's health.
And we talked about like The Rock, like the amount of roids that dude must be ingesting to get that. You can't be that big and that ripped naturally, like at his age especially. Like you just stop producing testosterone.
I think people would be surprised at how little you can be ripped without some involvement of something else, some sort of there are a range of things you can add to the mix, but just you left alone with some barbells, like even in the wasteland, how big could you get through human methods, like no protein powder, like just supplementing your diet in a wasteland environment? Is it protein rich enough that you can bulk up like a Chris Hemsworth or something?
Age, if you are probably like sort of 35 and under.
Yeah.
But
after 40, don't you lose like 5% of your muscle mass every year or something?
100%. Yeah, totally. Muscle mass and also like testosterone.
Yeah. So,
you're not growing, your muscles aren't growing anymore. So there's no, you would need to eat by the way, you'd also need to eat like every 2 hours to maintain any kind of muscle mass. And in the wasteland, I imagine that's pretty hard to do. Like I did like in Furiosa how Angus Sampson's character, the organic mechanic, is making him blood sausages, like taking like dog meat and then making a black sausage using human blood, like the blood of his adopted daughter. It's like, this is a fucking, like there are so many moments in it which I was like, oh, that's pretty hardcore for a mainstream film. Like the maggot sequence where she loses her arm and she wakes up, and you can just tell that the director has a background in medical science because there's such specificity around, the rotting of the limb and, the way it could be removed and stuff. And even I found the way she lost her arm so like brutal, and she doesn't lose it straight away. It gets kind of like broken at first, and then she gets strapped up, and the fact that she's able to pull it off, and it's like, oh, that's hardcore. That's probably one of the most hardcore things I've seen in a Mad Max film.
Yeah, I agree. Like, because it felt real. In an unreal universe, that felt real.
Yeah, Dr. George is like, hang on, when they're doing the writer's room, I know how this goes. I know what happens here. But I also couldn't work out, were the maggots, are they good or bad when you get maggots on an open wound?
Felt like it was like, it kind of was shot almost like it was like a cleaning thing, right? But like leeches. But
I'm going to type in, are maggots good for an open wound?
Okay, great.
Maggots good
because
for...
instinctively you would think no, right?
Yeah.
Like having maggots in you at any point, you'd be like, this doesn't feel like it's a good sign. My day hasn't gone well. All these maggots on this open wound that I have are the indication of that.
Okay, so this is from the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital website. What is maggot therapy?
Okay.
Maggot therapy involves the use of maggots and of the green bottlefly, which are introduced to the wound to remove necrotic, sloughy, and or infected tissue. Maggots can also be used to maintain a clean wound after debridement if a particular wound is considered prone to resloughing.
Yeah, okay. So basically, like, necrotic flesh is like the dead flesh, right? So it's like, how do you remove the dead flesh? That's what the maggots are for.
Get some maggots in there.
Yeah.
So that's clearly so that makes that scene even better. And this is why he's such a good filmmaker, because you initially watch that scene and you're like, what a nightmarish thing to wake up to. She's in this morgue of sorts, surrounded by rotting corpses or half dead people, and her arm wound is infested with maggots, and she's got this creepy old woman saying, we're trying to help you, or whatever, whatever she was yelling at her.
She was. That's the thing, is like, I reckon that scene, and even when I first viewed it, I was like, what I love about it is I think that old lady is trying to help her, right? She has nursed her back to health in some sort of way, but because, like, when she wakes up in that environment, it is so confronting to her, she immediately flees a situation in which someone may well be trying. But even you as a viewer, certainly if you were in the middle of that situation, you don't know if that is a dangerous situation or if, like, because it presents as a dangerous situation. So her reaction is to react as you would to flee in that situation. So it's just, I mean...
And I think that couple, that was a planned and payoff, because do you remember when they initially went to the Citadel when she was a young girl and Dementor's tried to take it over, and then that skirmish starts and everything falls apart, and then she gets dragged underground by that old couple? I think it's the same couple.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, I think so, yeah. And by the way, that transition of finding, like, a young actress who, like, could so easily morph into the older version of them in the movie is...
Okay, but there is a trick to that, and it's fucking brilliant. I only found this out last night, because I too was like, where does the young girl start and finish and Anna Taylor-Joy begin? Because it was seamless, at which point they crossed over. But there's some digital trickery, Will. So apparently what they did is they use visual effects to slowly add Anya Taylor-Joy features to that young actress's face, but just incrementally building it over time. So when she finally becomes Anya Taylor-Joy, it feels completely seamless. What a fucking filmmaker!
I mean, seriously. I mean, it's a really good movie. Like, it's not Fury Road, but it is, like, there's so much in this. And in a way that I just thought really added to... It's such an unexplored universe in so many ways. And this just gave you an indication into how much you could literally... I mean, can we... It's just the only pity of this is that George Miller is 80 years old, right? Or 79 years old or whatever he is. Like... How long can we sustain, like, Dr. George so that he can...
If the box office returns are anything to go by, this may be the end of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I don't, like, I don't care. Like, we've got to find a way. We've got to find a way to, like, keep these stories.
Here's what I think will happen. Is it'll become a TV series. I think it'll be Stories from the Wasteland, because it makes the most sense. You know, in a lot of ways, it is, when you don't do it the way George does it, you could probably make it a relatively affordable TV show. You know, you sort of keep everyone on.
If it's a relatively affordable TV show, I don't want to get overly optimistic about this, but I reckon based on Dr. George's propensity for using, like, piss-weak Australian celebrities as part of his, like, universe building, I reckon we might be a shot to get in the film if it became a TV series.
It'd be great. Like, just there's two podcasters in the wasteland talking into coconuts. They've just got
Wrong
they've
side
got two
of the
coconut
coconut.
shells for headphones, and they've got another coconut that they're talking into, and it's going over the loudspeaker. You know, like I would give anything just to do a cameo in like a Mad Maxi verse. But I think that, I mean, it's also just where cinema's going. Like, apart from Barbenheimer, there's no blockbusters anymore, and they poured a lot of money into this. Maybe the distance between Fury Road and this was too short to sort of capitalise, but Fury Road wasn't necessarily
Well,
a
that's what I
movie.
keep reading, is that Fury Road didn't actually do as well. Like, the people who saw it loved it, but it didn't do as well as, like, the idea. I think people's expectations for how big a blockbuster this was going to be were wrong, and now it's being judged in relationship to that. But I would actually say, and as someone who is not going to the movies much anymore, I'm guilty of being one of those people, but this, I would have regretted so much if I didn't see this on the big screen, because it still is visually spectacular, even if it's not Fury Road. Like, it is, like, I mean, sitting watching it on the big screen, letting the entire universe, you don't want to be distracted by anything else when you're watching this. You just want to be able to go into that world and spend the time in that world, and it's well worth seeing at the cinema.
Especially just for the action sequences. Like, I'm sure you could enjoy them on a small screen, but when you are immersed in it, and, you know, the way he shoots and his cinematographer shoots, it's not Dean Selma, I think it's someone else this time, but keeping all the action center frame, and the way his wife has edited it, so you're well oriented, you know where things are in relation to other things. It's so immersive. But what I love most about it is you can feel, just by watching the War Boys and all the other kind of stuntmen in it, how much fun they're having. Like, you know that this is the Olympics. Like, this is the highest echelon of stunt work for all these guys, and that they're just all clamoring to kind of just do their best stuff. And I thought after the polecat sequence in Fury Road, well, there's no way they can innovate like a highway chase anymore. And then they bring out the fucking paragliders. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like, who thought of that? Excellent. It's so good. And the way they kind of work that action into it. And sometimes, like, you know, you'll watch an action movie like The Fast and the Furious and whatever, and it's like, oh, well, they've done that because it looks cool, but it actually has no practical purpose. Whereas I feel like the Tommy knocker on the back of the war rig is actually a practical, it looks spectacular and is an amazing kind of like climax to an action sequence. But it also has a practical application where you're like, oh, okay, sure. If you need to defend this truck from the rear, but you only had a certain amount of resources, this probably would be the best thing that you could make. And the paragliders is the same. Oh, yeah, you need to do aerial assault, but you don't have enough fuel to, you know, fly aeroplanes. So you just tow paragliders on the back of motorbikes. All of it makes logical sense and is incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I mean, that is spectacular. And it's also such a storytelling scene. Like, that's the other thing that separates it from, say, a Fast and the Furious or whatever, where you're like, almost the action sometimes is incidental to the story, right? It's just happening because it's action, and action has to happen on the way. Whereas, like, there is so much storytelling about the power dynamics and relationships and strengths and weaknesses, and, like, in that universe, just from that one scene, I think.
Now, there's a character who I think has attracted a bit of controversy, which is Praetorian Jack, the love interest, who I initially misunderstood the nature of the relationship. I thought he was a lot older than her, and I thought it was a sort of mentor-protege type relationship, but then it seems to be romantic towards the end. But I found it a bit odd that they've had no Max this entire movie and it's functioning fine, and then they bring in this very Mad Max-esque character down to the way he dresses, that sort of, not a Tom Hardy Mad Max, more of you going back to your old Mel Gibson stoic, you know, man with no name Mad Max. And I thought the actor, Tom Burke, who I don't know, I'm not familiar with his work, but I thought he was excellent. I thought he did a great job. But I just thought it was interesting why they brought this character in. Did she need a love interest? Was it like compelling? Because she had enough motivation to want revenge with her mother. Did she need extra revenge because of her potential lover being, you know, killed or whatever it was?
That was his role. I think his role was a couple of things. Like to give her something a bit more neutral to react. Like, I mean, he had, like you said, there was a very sort of almost like a like very charming, but it was like a sexless romance. Like you said, there was a blurriness between mentor and, like, is this romantic?
Student.
Is this a mentor? Is this just like a, replacement for a father figure she never had? Like, there was like a grey area there, I think, that was like established in that power dynamic. I think he was to show in a way that Max is just, like, Max isn't a superhero. Max is a version of, like, guys that are in this universe, that are useful in this universe, and you can choose to be part of the system, which is kind of what this guy had chosen to do, or you can choose to be outside the system, which is what, like, kind of Max is, right? Like, he goes along by himself, whereas this guy, who is very much like Max, like, this is like almost like another path that Max could have chosen, which is to be a useful member of the society, but to still, like, have that same sort of skill set and whatever it might be. Work within the system rather than outside, right?
Yeah, it's a good point, right? Because at first, now that I think about it, I'm like, oh, why is his costume so similar to Max and, his behavior? But if you think about both characters, Mad Max was ex-police.
Yeah.
And, so he came from that sort of hierarchical, that system of power and that hierarchical structure. And he wears the leathers because that was his pursuit vehicle outfit and all that kind of stuff. This guy, his parents were both military, he says. And so it would make sense that, if you line up contemporary police, fire, ambulance, they all wear a similar style uniform, right? So it would make sense that you are someone who works with vehicles, you're a driver, you're going to wear leathers because you need some kind of protection if you fall out of the truck or if you get attacked by marauders or whatever. So I guess it does make sense that you would have shoulder pads and leather jacket and leather pants and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, but I genuinely believe that there is meant to be a comparison between the two.
Okay, so you think that's very much intentional?
I don't think that in this universe, like, do you honestly think that they go to the detail of planting everything else that's in this universe, and yet they didn't notice that the main character was wearing the same thing as the previous main character in the movie? I think it's all a payoff for that one scene where you actually see Max, like in the movie, and
I love that,
and it's so ambiguous
I got very excited
to whether he plays a role in helping Furiosa at that time. Like, you can read that as, did he just go off and she was helped in some other way, or did he help but then took off without, sticking around to play any part in that? As opposed to this Max character, this Max-like character that is in her life, that is in the middle of the society, doing something that's, like, in the role where she is at that point of her life. Even the idea that the Max from Fury Road is stuck around at the end, right?
Yeah.
Because that's very different to what this character does. Like, either they don't do anything to help, or they help but don't stick around to see, what happened. You get to have that story told in counterpoint to this other Max-like character that... Because I think the thing about Mad Max is Mad Max has never been... Like, Mad Max doesn't have special powers. Mad Max doesn't have, like, it was just a story of somebody's...
Is a survivalist
journey in this, right? And they're always external to the society or the stories that are being told. And this one's much more a story of inside the society rather than, Anyway, I think it was deliberate, is my point. Because otherwise, it makes no sense.
And I guess it's sort of that point you're saying about Max is ordinary. You're right. Like, we have this idea that he's exceptional because he's the only version of this guy we've ever seen.
Right.
But potentially, there's a bunch of leather-clad, monosyllabic men with no name who don't have an allegiance to any one town, who just cruise around and just try and stay out of trouble until they get drawn into trouble. Men and women. I mean, there's probably some Maxines as well, Mad Maxines out there as well. In fact, that's what I want to see in the TV show.
But also, there's that thing of... I think that's what Dementor's looking so much like a Morton Joe, kind of in, like, overall look, has to do with it a bit as well, which is like going, there are different versions of a guy who looks like this, a big, powerful, flowing haired, tall, imposing, like, created in different ways, one in really physical, one with a bit more costuming and masks and whatever it might be, pageantry around it, like, military style pageantry and uniform around it. But it's still different versions of the same thing. And by giving us another version of Max, one that could have stayed inside the system, found a role for themselves within like a world that already... I think it then juxtaposes with the... Because there's an opportunity at the end of Fury Road where I'm sure Max could have stuck around and been also part of that society, like in a different universe, in a different... But it isn't that, right?
Do you think there was any point, like, though, when there was no moment in Fury Road where Furious is like, you remind me of someone. Like, I used to know a guy who was very similar to you.
Well, I don't think that... I mean, firstly, it's a long time ago. Secondly, I don't think they are very similar people to her. To her, they would probably appear like two completely different people, because I don't think they do have a lot in common with each other. To us,
well, that is true.
Externally, they feel like they
Praetorian Jack is a lot more composed and got his shit together, whereas Max is much more of a rat just trying to survive, just a bit more especially the way Tom Hardy plays him. But I did sort of feel like, I mean, what I loved about this film too is the way they subvert most kind of tropes that you've seen 100 times before. So, like when they get to that ambush in Gastown, and she escapes, and you're like, oh, he's going to sacrifice himself to save her, you know. But then she goes back and saves him, and they get away. But then, what would have happened in a more predictable film or a less thoughtful film is that he gets that big heroic moment, and there you go. There's the kickstart of the third act, and now she's got her firmed motivation, her mother and her friend and lover. You know, now she can go. But you don't even see him die. And that's what I actually found was the best performance that Hemsworth gave, was when you're sort of seeing the cracks form. Like he's lost a lot of his crew. You know, they've got her tied up, and Praetorian Jack's being dragged around in the back of a motorbike, and the focus is not on him; it's on Dementus and just how his psyche, how he's not ever really enjoying it. Like he's doing it because he has to. Yeah. This is how he's maintained power thus far, is to be ruthless and violent, and it's ordinary, really, in the way that Praetorian Jack dies. We don't even see it; it happens off camera, and you know because when I realised what was going to happen, you know, he was strapping up Furiosa with her broken arm to watch her friend get murdered. What a horrendous, horrible thing. But then George says, well, that's going to let the theatre of the mind take care of that, and I'm just going to show you what this is doing to Dementus and where he is. Right. So by the time she gets to that point of exacting revenge, he's pathetic. You know, he's this guy who's lost all his aura, whatever it was frightening. It's like, he's nothing. And so what is she going to get from ending his life or torturing him? A tree, it turns out.
I mean, that image to me is one of the best images of the entire film. Like, almost for that alone.
Yeah.
Like, something
so many
that could
shots,
have been
though.
So cheesy or so... but it could have not worked, was absolutely breathtaking, I thought, in its execution.
I know that you're not a huge visual guy when you see films, but there were some shots in this which I'm just unbelievable. Like there's that one shot where it starts up close on that sort of that painting, and then it pulls out and you see the guy doing the same painting as a giant mural, and it's just one continuous shot. And it's or the time lapse of the wig on the branch. It's just so artfully crafted.
Yeah, I think, you know what, I'll put a little asterisk next to that I don't really like.
A little French,
visual.
a little Gaulish villager.
That would be Asterix. I made it very clear that I was talking about an Asterix and Morty. And
yeah. Asterix Astley.
Yeah, of course. I just Asterix rolled you. I like visual storytelling like this, where the visuals, I really am like, oh no, I get what you're saying here. You're moving this story forward absolutely through the visuals. So I kind of like things that tell stories. And I know that, you know, some people would argue that, you know, there's a lot of visual storytelling that happens in things that I don't like. And I get that too, but often I feel like it's you've just put the screensaver on, and at some stage you're going to get back to the story, right? Whereas, like, I never feel that about these movies. I always feel like every visual is actually part of the language of the story that it is being told to you. And so, absolutely. No, I'm arrested by so many visual parts of this movie.
Yeah, and also, like, you can sort of see that idea that it was storyboarded, you know, before a script was written. You can totally see it, almost like a comic book.
Yeah.
And so many, that idea that you could watch it without sound, because that was what I was struck by the most, is like, you don't even really need to be listening to this to understand exactly what's going on at any one time, and the juxtaposition of certain scenes together to say something about the characters, or, you know, even like Dementus at the bullet farm, you know, that tower's collapsing, he's holding on as like bullets are raining down over him, and it's just like, oh, it just says everything. And, you know, again, to those people who say there's no story, fucking shut up.
Well,
Like,
it's kind of,
so
it's
much
almost got a foreign language, because I imagine to people around the world, like in Australia, it is, much of it is even a little incomprehensible to us in the extreme accents or the language that they might be using. Some of it quite antiquated. Like there's a real mixture of modern and historic language, like kind of like, you know, pigeoned together into this new version of language. But I imagine, having lived overseas and people finding the Australian accent incomprehensible when we speak it, that this might feel like a foreign language film a lot of the time to international audiences, I would have thought.
I also thought too that, you know, for someone who's in his 80s, and Nico's probably in his 70s as well, no, late 60s, early 70s, that those two gentlemen, by creating this kind of original language, it didn't feel like, sometimes you watch, you know, some of George Romero's last few films, and, you know, he was getting up there as well, and him trying to write contemporary dialogue or write, you know, dialogue for characters who are 25 and under, it just felt like an old man trying to guess how the way kids talk. But because this is almost a language or a syntax unto itself, it never feels dated or belonging to a certain period of time. Like you said, they use some slang from the 70s, 80s, 90s, or whatever it is, with some modern terminology. And I think that there must have been some room for Hemsworth to improvise, because there's a couple of things that he busted out that I was like, oh, that feels very modern. But I loved it because it was consistent within the inconsistency of the story, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Because it's all a bit of a mishmash of various styles and influences into the various shapes it becomes. It was almost, and the fact that, I mean, this is the other thing that I love, is like so much of both Australia, like, why are we all living in the desert, or are we not all living in the desert? Because there was a real sense that there are other communities living in other places. Can they just not make it to the coast?
Darwin was mentioned. I think there's something about the Darwin something or another. Yeah.
Like, what happened? Like, where? Like, anyway,
rising oceans would have forced people out of, like, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Adelaide, I reckon.
Okay, but where did the ocean stop? Like, why can't you still go? Anyway, I love the fact that at the start it's Australia. That felt very bold to me. Like, you know what I mean? It didn't.
Yeah.
I was like, in case you've been guessing, it was the real, oh my God, it was Earth all along moment where you're like, we kind of knew. We always kind of assumed it was Australia, but the fact that it, like, really, you are here at the start of the film felt like a bold choice to me.
I love it. I had such a swell of patriotic pride when I saw that. I also wondered
Australia.
too. Yeah. So, like, you got like Tina Turner and Charlize Theron. So there's a few like, I mean, I know she's South African, but for all intents and purposes, like a few Americans who got stuck in Australia after the apocalypse.
That's right.
And it's like, I wonder if they feel better or worse about being here. It's like, oh shit.
Oh no, things are fine in America. Meanwhile, in America, perfect utopian society.
It's utopia. Renewable energy. Everything's on an electrical grid. Everyone's got enough to eat. I mean, maybe that's the next stage. Is we like with the Wasteland, they broaden. I mean, I don't think it'll work as well. Like that must be a temptation, right? Is that, oh, let's make this a TV series, but we'll make it more palatable to an American audience. So we'll have mainly American cast or whatever. I think that would be a huge mistake. I think what makes it appealing and interesting is the Australianness of it, because let's be honest. We live in a weird fucking country, a weird outpost of a country with strange flora and fauna and customs and, all these different cultural influences.
Yeah.
That's what makes it interesting. If suddenly it's a generic post-apocalyptic Western with American accent, then I'm not interested.
I mean, look, it's pretty bold, but is there an argument the government just pivots all the money that it was putting into the Australian arts industry to George Miller? Just let's just lean into the Mad Max of it. You know what I mean? We've nailed one thing as a country in entertainment. Let's lean into that. Let's get all our creatives to be because George can't be expected to do all it himself. But let's just recruit all Australian creatives to work in a sort of let's just
compulsory service.
Yes.
Like some people have to go into the army. When you leave high school in Australia, you have to work on a Mad Max film or TV show for 3 years.
3 years
before you're 3 years.
Well, maybe a year. No, just
You've got
a
to
year.
be an extra,
like a year
or
each.
work in production.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's right. Yeah, everyone's just got to do a year.
Yeah,
and we'll just produce mostly Mad Max related content.
Fuck. Dude, I'd be so down. I actually just got a book from I ordered online. It's called The Legend of Mad Max, which is a compendium of all the Mad Max movies. And I just I was flicking through it last night, going, I just don't know what it is. Maybe it was the impression it made me on a young kid, but I have always loved this franchise, and I'm just so grateful that it has continued to be good, that I haven't had to go through that Star Wars reckoning where it's like, oh no, they sold out to Disney and they've fucking ripped the heart out of the idea.
I just watched a Mad Max movie that I enjoyed as much as any movie that I have seen in the last, 3, 4, 5 years, honestly. I really, really like this movie a lot and really enjoyed the entire experience. And it didn't have Mad Max in it. I mean, it had Mad Max in it for 1 second. You know what I mean? The feat that I have just loved this Mad Max movie, and Mad Max wasn't in it. Didn't even think about it. Didn't care one way or the other whether Mad Max had popped. If there had been no Mad Max in this film, I would have been absolutely as happy as I am that Mad Max was in the film, right? Literally, you've taken... That's amazing, Charlie. It's amazing.
Yeah. It is amazing. And I love, too, that if it had been one of those Disney reboots or Star Wars or whatever, they would have made a big deal about, that Mad Max cameo. They would have made more of it where he says, my name's Max. Some people say I'm mad, or some shit like that. All it was a wide shot of the Interceptor with a dude eating dog food. That's it, and that's all we needed, and that says so much. It's that is a perfect amount of Max. He's meant to be mythological.
Yes,
he's meant to be this person, this man with no name, and that's all we need to see. We don't need to find out all this backstory stuff. And I feel too, there were nods. Fan service nods, but they were just much more subtle and sophisticated. The very first Mad Max, his wife is run down by a bunch of bikers, and that's what kicked off this whole fucking thing. And then in Furiosa, you've got a limping Dementus running through the desert, and she's very slowly checking after him. It's like a total inversion of what happened to Max when this whole thing kicked off. And I'm like, see, that's how you do fan service. That's how you say, oh, you remember this bit? Well, we're just going to subvert it and turn it on its head. So it's still the same thing, but we're going to comment on it. It's just, I love him. I love George Miller. I love the Mad Max franchise. I'm so glad we got to do 2 episodes on it.
Yeah, and easily.
We could probably do more.
We both only saw it in the last 48 hours. We'll have a lot more thoughts once we've had time to think about it.
Yeah, and say it again. But we do need to wind things up.
Yes.
I found this one letter which seems appropriate. We did talk a little bit about America and their portions. This is from Jocelyn, who says, "Hi, gents. Serial writer here. Thank you for all the laughs and thought-provoking conversation. I'm going to keep this short so I can buy some Jats Tim Tams. Speaking of sweet and salty, you were chatting about how Americans eat breakfast. I'm an American, and I can say a couple of things. Aussies are terrible at breakfast. Apart from avocado on toast, yawn. When you order scrambled eggs and toast, yes, that's what you get. But what about a combo plate like you get in America? I want my savory eggs, my bacon, my hashed brown, plus sweet pancakes with maple syrup. I feel like based on the adoration of sweet and salty you share, you'd love this."
No, that's gluttony. That's absolute gluttony. Your country has misled you. When you get scrambled eggs on toast, here's what you need to get. Some scrambled eggs, on some toast. That's all you actually need from that transaction.
Also, Charlie, why is the food so dense and heavy in America? It's because of Crisco. The answer, especially in the South and especially for pies, is Crisco. Wikipedia defines Crisco as an American brand of shortening that is produced by B&G Foods. It was introduced in June 1911 by Procter & Gamble, and it was the first shortening to be made entirely of vegetable oil, originally cottonseed oil. Okay, so much like corn syrup, Americans find a cheap way to create a food additive, which won't have any ramifications down the line for future generations.
That's right.
It doesn't continue.
8 things for breakfast. That'll get you thinking, your thinking part getting going.
As for the subject of this message, Charlie and Guy Davis were discovering movies on a recent TOFOP with friends and brought up the newest Ghostbusters movie, something you have both touched on a few times. And how people most likely see this new chapter in the franchise would be people who know and love the original Ghostbusters and are also checking out the new one from a point of nostalgia, or something along those lines. As we keep repeating storylines, is there nothing new to become nostalgic about? So where does that leave the new Garfield movie, which has come out at the same time as Furiosa, I believe, opened in the same weekend. And sadly, Furiosa only just beat the new Garfield movie. Do kids these days know Garfield? Is he relevant? Considering newspapers are barely read and the Sunday comics aren't a thing anymore, why is 2024 the year of a newly animated Garfield movie? Who knows? Like, recognisable IP... someone owns the rights to it.
Yes, I mean partly that, and I assume Garfield the movie, like, has some nostalgia. Because I'm always interested in what younger people are nostalgic about. Like, and often it is franchises that to us didn't seem like weird cash-ins or like throwaway movies or whatever have become quite important to younger generations, because to them they didn't see it through the cynical eye of being an older person. It was the thing that they got put in front of when they were a kid, and now they have this like affection to, whatever the version of that might be. There's going to be a point in the future where they're like, I'll fucking murder you over a Minion, mate. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I mean, I had some affection for Garfield when I was a kid. I used to read all the comics and stuff, but Iona just sees a cartoon cat, and that's enough for her. And that's the thing. Like, it's not necessarily. It's
like, it translates pretty easy, right? Even if you don't know much about Garfield going into the Garfield movie, I reckon pretty early on you'll pick up that he loves lasagna and he's not that fond of Mondays.
And I think, is it Chris Pratt is voicing him as well? So he's done Mario and Garfield, which suggests that those characters have a similar view on life, which I would never have thought before those two movies have come out.
It would be great. I've never seen any of the Garfield movies, so maybe they do this. But it would be great if they did it in that modern superhero style of Garfield movies, where for the entire movie, Garfield actually quite likes Mondays. Like, never had a lasagna, and it's not until the final scene of
his
entire
origin
movie
story. His mother gets murdered by a tray of lasagna or something like that. They're living in an alleyway out the back of an Italian restaurant. Some waiter comes out and smashes his mum in the head with a tray of lasagna. Garfield. Oh no, he loves lasagna. Sorry,
he loves lasagna.
Smashes her with a Monday is what I meant to say.
It's on a Monday.
On a Monday. All right. Before we go, this Saturday, Will, we're doing the first of our many live shows at the Basement Comedy Club in Melbourne. There may be some tickets still available at the door. I'm not sure. We're recording this a couple of weeks in advance. It may have sold out by then, but if not, go to Try Booking and there'll be a link in the episode description and you can buy a ticket there. We're also selling exclusive merch. So if you are coming to the show and you want the TOFOP Live poster, you can buy an exclusive t-shirt at the venue. I'll be there. I bought myself one of those little tap squares that people can pay me with.
Are you serious?
So if you're coming to the show and you want to get your very own TOFOP, exclusive TOFOP merch, I've only limited this to like 50 t-shirts. So you'll be one of a very exclusive club. We've already pre-sold a few online. I've been teaching myself.
I like a limited edition of anything. Yeah. Like I do quite like a. I mean, look, to be honest, you might have told me about this and I'd just forgotten, but I feel like I'm hearing about this for the first time. So
I haven't. I've been stressing myself the fuck out because I'm like, geez, this is difficult. Someone suggested to me, they said, the Little Dum Dum does quite well with their merchandise. Have you guys ever thought about doing more merch? And I said, well, we sort of do merch, but we have never sold it at the live show, and that seems to be the best place to sell merch. And so I have been in contact with this merch company, and they've printed us these amazing looking T-shirts. But then I'm like,
great.
oh fuck! Now I have to sell these.
Wow.
I have to move these. Otherwise, it's been a waste of money. Otherwise, it's a very.
I reckon there
event.
might be a friend of the show who'd be pretty keen to come in and help us sell a few T-shirts.
I think I know who you're talking about. If you can't make it to the show, but you still want to support us in some way, the best way to do that is on Patreon. Patreon.com/everyone relax. Full videos of TOFOP, The Unexplained Explained, a heap of archive material, comic strips by James Fosdyke. It's a treasure trove of Everyone Relax content. Will, what are you doing at the moment?
I'm on to comedy.com.au. When you're hearing this, Geelong is this week, but other dates still to come. So, yeah, check out, particularly North Queensland, some regional New South Wales, but I'm all over the place. So Glenelg Winter Arts Festival, I should plug that. That's recently come on sale, and that was a great show last year. So if you're in South Australia, Adelaide, if you want to come and see, Adelaide always get the fringe, so they get the early version of the show. So if you'd like to come and see what the completed version of the show is, Glenelg Winter Arts Festival.
Yeah, you saw Mad Max. Now come see Furiosa, essentially. That's what we'll say.
Get some of the gaps filled in.
All right, that's TOFOP for this week. I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Will Anderson.